sometimes it feels like the biggest hurdle is just engagement, and like you can't hold someone's attention longer than a TikTok video.
What is all of this screen time doing to our brains, and could the impacts be long-lasting, especially for kids?
This year, I think the most taxing thing for me, I guess that's negatively impacted, is like the amount of apathy, or just like the general lack of caring about things, from just not finishing assignments to like not participating to, I don't know, like just the way they talk to their teachers and stuff. I just find it bizarre.
Sometimes the respect levels cross quite frequently, and teachers are human. We have feelings. As much as like we're an adult and we're your teachers, like we still get affected by some of the things that are said to us.
I think what makes it hard is sometimes as a teacher when you see potential and then you don't see kids reach for it. Like every adult, you know the hard lessons are coming and you're trying to like help them learn to navigate them better, and they don't want to listen and they don't appreciate it, which I'm sure they don't do to their parents either.
One of my biggest frustrations with students is the excuses and the lack of effort. It's discouraging for me and it's exhausting for me.
Constantly thinking about what can I do to make my lessons better for them? How can I make sure that they're getting what they need? And that doesn't stop the second that I walk out my classroom door.
It's my first year of teaching, and I remember a student mocked me for the very first time. I was full of emotion, so I remember that was my least fondest memory.
I don't know, like I had like kids light like a stink bomb in my room at the beginning of the year, and that was just like annoying. Having them like tell their parents that I said these things that I didn't say, and then they come and like attack you, and then fighting with them about like the whole mask mandate stuff was awful. But a lot of it was just rudeness, apathy, and defiance. I think was just like what really set me off.
I see a lot of kids get frustrated and not know how to handle their emotions. I also think that their filters have kind of gone away a little bit. Appropriate language and behavior in the classroom versus when they're hanging out with their friends, that wall has kind of come down a little bit. Maybe it was that critical period from the end of middle school to the beginning of high school where that maturing process didn't really occur because they weren't around their peers like they normally would be. I feel like I'm teaching life skills more in a way of how and when to behave in certain ways.
I just listened to somebody say they had a kid who was screaming and throwing a fit and having, why? Something happened. Something happened to that student that's causing that outburst. And maybe your space isn't the space they need at that moment. And I think that's something else that comes with being a veteran teacher. There's days when I know somebody's having a hard day, right? And then you learn to navigate those hard days differently. Are kids in general more disrespectful? In general, I'd say yes, but I also see it comes in different levels.
I realized how much human connection means when you're in person.
Like you teach something and then you ask a question and there's just no one responded and it was just all black screens. Failure rates were high, so then you're like, is it something that I'm doing? Is it just like COVID? And then obviously just no one knew what they were doing.
I think we all learned that we were not adequately prepared to be relying on email or messaging services. Really, the best results come from face-to-face with students. They hear you, they understand, they can ask questions.
I'm glad to see human connections again, and I'm glad to see people's smiling faces. And I'm just happy to be able to share my culture with the kids and people participating more. Seeing
who students are as like whole individuals outside of like just being like a student is really cool. And then like just getting to know them as like people and like, I don't know, like what they want to do and like what they're inspired by and stuff. That's really cool. Like last year, which was like weird because when we came back and we had people for like a week, or like once a week or whatever, this one kid was like, I heard it from his mom, and then she was like, oh my god, like you were such a huge help, like because of you he like came out and like all this stuff, and like you have no idea like how important that was and like it's a big impact on his life. Small things we do where we feel like we have such a small role in people's lives ends up being a lot bigger in the grand scheme of things, I guess.
It's the saddest story. I had a student a couple of years ago. He just was never like the student who raised his hand or anything like that. And this particular student happened to come in. I could tell he was having a really rough day. I offered to send him to the counseling office. He refused to go. Happened to see that student walking home that day. He saw me, I saw him, we had waved at each other. Later that night, he unfortunately took his own life.
I had to tell my 6th period class the day after what happened, and that definitely was the most challenging thing I think I've ever had to do in my whole entire life. That was the worst discussion I've ever had to have with anyone about anything.
So to hear that the next day, right, plays the blame game on a teacher emotionally, because maybe I shouldn't have said, do you want to go? Maybe I should have forced the meeting. Like, you just play those games, like, what could I have done to save this poor student?
I went home and was wondering, did he ever say anything to me that should have been a red flag? Did I not hear him when he was asking for help? You don't stop thinking about it for a while, and then it makes you a lot more aware moving forward of like what your students might need from you as a human, as opposed to just a teacher of content.
When I was a new teacher, I had a student, his name was Mark Freeman, and I didn't see him very often. And so one weekend I went with my husband. We all went off to the river. I was, of course, riding my husband's motorcycle. And Mark and I had that connection. Mark and I had a motorcycle connection. Sure enough, crash. And I ended up with a scar on my arm. I couldn't wait to get back to school Monday, and I was gonna call him out of class. I was gonna send him a call slip, have him come see me so I could show him my scar and tell him the story about how I crashed my husband's motorcycle. We got back late Sunday night, so Monday morning my mom calls me and she says, hey, a kid passed away from your school. I said, oh. She goes, I just heard it on the news. I go, huh. Did you get the name? She said some random name. I didn't know the name. Okay, that's unfortunate. I get to school and I start asking around, who was the student that passed away? And they said it was Mark. It was my kid. It was Mark Freeman. And I lost it. I loved this kid. Teachers aren't supposed to have favorites, but he just was so dear to my heart. He had made so many poor choices, but yet he so wanted to do everything right. I said, well, how did he pass away? And he was on a motorcycle. And he was on a motorcycle right in front of the school. And he just lost control, hit a light pole, passed away right in front of the school on Friday night. I would be on my way to work and I would come around the corner and just see, and I would cry every morning on the way to work because one of my kids didn't make it. I love my students so much. The thought of losing them at such a young age, so hard. Because they're my kids. And somebody will be like, wait, are you talking about your own biological children? Or are you talking about your students? And so they're just my kids. My students are my kids.